CEO Thomas Sterling slammed his glass down, wine splashing against crystal like a gavel striking judgment. He leaned across the table, eyes sharp, voice dripping with the kind of confidence money buys, but wisdom never earns. I bet. $800,000 says this waiter can't even say hello, or neither can he communicate in Japanese. Look at him. He doesn't look like someone who could even interpret simple English sentences very well. The room erupted, laughter rolling through expensive suits and polished smiles, every chuckle heavier than the insult itself. Across from them, the waiter didn't flinch. His hands stayed steady, his gaze fixed, calm as still water. To Thomas, he was invisible, another background prop in their performance of power. But behind that quiet stare was a storm gathering, a mind counting every word, every sneer, every dollar at stake. In less than a minute, his arrogance would meet its translator, and the room that laughed would soon forget how to breathe. New York City, night, glass and steel shimmer against the Hudson. The camera glides down to the Ridge, Manhattan's most exclusive rooftop restaurant, where power eats quietly and arrogance is plated medium rare. Inside, chandeliers sparkle like chilled champagne. A jazz trio plays a Coltrane ballad. Tables murmur with CEOs, diplomats, influencers, the American aristocracy of the quarter hour. Behind them, unseen, moves Marcus Hale, 6'2", calm eyes, precision-sharp movements. His white shirt is pressed to geometry, his posture, perfect neutrality. In rooms like this, silence is armor. They don't pay for your presence, only your absence when needed. At the corner table sits Thomas Sterling, mid-50s, CEO of Sterling Dynamics Logistics. White hair cut with surgical vanity. Around him, executives from Tokyo's Kobayashi Maritime Group, Hiroshi Tanaka, Reiko Sato, and a translator who barely speaks. Thomas owns the room the way a man owns an echo. He raises his glass. Here's to bridges across oceans, and prophets tall enough to see them. Laughter, thin, polite. Marcus refills glasses, invisible but listening. The translator hesitates over a phrase. Marcus steps forward quietly, in crisp Japanese. Shiri shimasu. Ganbei no imi wa shirarashii kyoryu kankei ni kanbei o desu. Excuse me, he's proposing a toast to new cooperation. Hiroshi nods, surprised. The translator scribbles notes. Thomas barely notices. He's already telling a story about his yacht. Dessert arrives, bourbon pecan tart with vanilla bean. Thomas leans back, loosening his tie. Grinning to his CFO. Bet you a month's salary this kid doesn't know a word, or can he neither communicate in Japanese? Hiroshi looks up, expression stiff. Excuse me? Oh, come on. It's a compliment. He's sharp, but I'd bet 800 grand he can't hold a sentence or communicate in your language, Thomas said. A nervous chuckle ripples around the table. Marcus straightens, tray in hand. Would you like me to prove you wrong, sir? The table goes still. The only sound is the hum of the jazz bass. Thomas, smiling, shark-like. All right then, enlighten us. Marcus looks directly at Hiroshi, voice even. Konbanha, jinya hao moteneshi de kite guangrong desu. Good evening. It's an honor to serve you tonight. Reiko gasps. Hiroshi's brows rise. Your pronunciation is perfect, Hiroshi says. Thomas waves a dismissive hand. Phrasebook stuff. I said conversation. Let's make it official. He slaps the table. 800,000 says you can't hold a full business conversation for 2 minutes. No mistakes. Deal? Marcus sets down the tray. Calm. If you insist, sir, Marcus whispered. Hiroshi speaks, in Japanese. Deha shimemashouka. Shall we begin? The clock on the wall ticks once. The dining room fell into a hush that had texture. Dense, expectant. Forks stopped mid-air. Glasses paused at lips. Even the jazz trio seemed to retreat into silence. Marcus stood motionless beside the table, the faint glow from the chandelier reflecting on the polished glass of his tray. Across from him, Thomas Sterling reclined in his leather chair, confident, wine-heavy smirk curling into place. Hiroshi Tanaka straightened in his seat. The clock on the wall ticked like a metronome. When he finally spoke, it was in flawless, formal Japanese. The words came fast, boardroom vocabulary, economic nuance, the kind of conversation that separates the fluent from the amateur. Marcus didn't flinch. He answered smoothly, his tone even, precise. The rhythm of his language matched Hiroshi's tempo with surgical precision. He spoke like someone who had lived inside the language, not studied it. The words flowed about maritime contracts, tariff exemptions, and port inspections at Yokohama and Los Angeles. Marcus referenced real shipping statistics, numbers, government terms that only a logistics professional could know. Hiroshi leaned forward, eyebrows climbing higher with each sentence. Reiko Sato, the assistant, whispered something under her breath, astonishment mixed with delight. By the 90-second mark, every person at the table realized what they were witnessing. Not mimicry, not memorization, but mastery. Thomas's smirk began to collapse. His hand, resting on the wine glass, tightened until the stem quivered. Marcus didn't look at him. He was now engaged fully with Hiroshi, discussing shipment lead times and data analytics in Japanese with the calm of a seasoned consultant. When he paused, Hiroshi spoke a final question. It wasn't business. It was a test of culture, the kind of linguistic curveball no textbook could prepare for. "Tell me," Hiroshi said in Japanese, "what do you think of the saying, 'The nail that sticks out gets hammered down'?" Marcus smiled faintly. "Then maybe," he answered, "the hammer should learn to listen before it swings." There was a moment of stunned silence. Then the Japanese delegation laughed softly, appreciatively. Hiroshi turned toward Thomas. His voice was polite, but his gaze carried ice. "I believe the wager has been settled, Mr. Sterling." The restaurant staff, who had been pretending not to notice, exchanged quick glances. The sommelier bit back a grin. The room had turned. The air now belonged to Marcus. Thomas Sterling tried to recover with a brittle chuckle. "Come on now, it was just a joke. Surely we don't expect—" But Hiroshi cut him off in English this time, deliberate and clear. $800,000. That was your number, not ours. Japanese business is built on honor. You made a bet in front of witnesses." He gestured subtly toward the nearby tables, phones already out, recording, pretending to scroll through menus. Thomas's smile evaporated. His CFO muttered something about damage control, but it was too late. The humiliation was public now, and it was spreading. Marcus gave a polite bow. "If it helps," he said quietly. "I'm not interested in embarrassing you, sir." But the sentence carried the full weight of the embarrassment anyway. Hiroshi stood and extended his hand to Marcus. "That was extraordinary," he said. "Where did you learn?" "Tokyo," Marcus replied simply. "I worked there for 4 years. Communication is survival when you're invisible." Hiroshi nodded slowly. "Not invisible tonight." The video was 38 seconds long. It captured Thomas Sterling making his bet in perfect, arrogant clarity. "I bet 800 grand this guy doesn't know a single word of Japanese." It captured Marcus, speaking flawless Japanese, then bowing with grace while the table applauded. It captured Hiroshi's final line, "Japanese business is built on honor." By the time Marcus finished his shift, the video had already been posted on social media. Within 2 hours, it had 500,000 views. By morning, it was everywhere. Language genius. The waiter who won. The Ridge restaurant woke up to news trucks on the sidewalk and a swarm of journalists asking for the multilingual waiter. Marcus didn't answer any calls. He didn't post a statement. He simply showed up for his next shift on time, pressed uniform, silent as ever. But by then, Sterling Dynamics was in crisis. At Sterling Dynamics headquarters, the PR department scrambled. Investors were furious. The Kobayashi deal, the crown jewel partnership meant to anchor their Pacific expansion, was suddenly on hold. An internal email leaked within hours. Due to ethical concerns and public perception issues, Kobayashi Maritime is withdrawing from the proposed logistics merger. Translation: $180 million evaporated overnight. Thomas Sterling held a press conference, attempting charm. He called the wager a light-hearted misunderstanding. But the public wasn't buying it. The internet had already turned him into a meme. Everywhere he looked, Twitter, YouTube, cable news, his smirk was replayed on loop. Captioned, "Bet you can't." Lost $800,000. 3 days later, Marcus received a call from a Tokyo area code. It was Hiroshi Tanaka. "Mr. Hale," he said warmly, "I spoke to our legal department. The wager was verbal, but it was witnessed and recorded. Under New York law, it qualifies as a binding agreement. You will receive the funds shortly." Marcus paused. "You're serious?" "Completely. Sterling paid this morning. Sometimes honor must be forced to keep up with humility." Marcus exhaled slowly. "Thank you," he said. But the real win was watching him realize what ignorance costs. "True," Hiroshi said. "But take the money anyway. Let arrogance fund something better." When the call ended, Marcus sat alone in his small Harlem apartment, the city humming outside his window. On his laptop screen, his bank account refreshed. Plus $800,000. No confetti, no cheers. Just numbers and silence. He closed the screen, whispering to himself, "I guess I just got paid for listening." New York streets, still wet from night rain, reflected the first cold light of dawn. In Harlem, Marcus Hale sat at his small wooden table, the smell of black coffee rising from a chipped mug, his laptop open to a single line of digits that confirmed everything. $800,000, deposited real. There was no rush of triumph, no cinematic shout, just a slow exhale, the sound of dignity finally exhaling too. He stared at the screen for a long time, thinking about the kind of arrogance that could gamble on ignorance and call it humor. He remembered the faces at the restaurant, the laughter that had curdled when truth arrived dressed in humility. He thought of every quiet man and woman he'd worked beside, janitors, servers, cashiers, drivers, people who carried skill and intelligence beneath uniforms others never looked past. And he thought about how easily contempt travels between people who never learned to listen. At Sterling Dynamics, the silence was louder. Thomas Sterling walked through the lobby where his own portrait hung, a frozen grin above the company motto, "Efficiency through confidence." Confidence, he thought bitterly, had turned to poison. Every screen he passed glowed with the same headline: "CEO loses $800,000 bet to waiter who spoke perfect Japanese." Investors were calling, partners were withdrawing. The Kobayashi deal had collapsed completely, and the boardroom that once applauded his swagger now watched him with the cold neutrality reserved for failed assets. By noon, Sterling Dynamics Communications Office had drafted a statement about learning from the experience and celebrating diversity. But the internet wasn't interested in corporate repentance. The world had already made up its mind. Thomas signed his resignation 3 days later. His office window reflected a city that didn't care, and somewhere far below, a delivery van rolled past bearing a Hale Language Academy logo he didn't recognize yet. Marcus didn't buy a car or a condo or a trip to Bali. He rented a small office space on Malcolm X Boulevard, a second-floor walk-up with faded linoleum floors and sunlight that arrived reluctantly between buildings. There he opened the Hale Language Institute, a school for service workers, immigrants, and anyone who had ever been underestimated. The first class had 7 students: a Jamaican dishwasher, a Ghanaian taxi driver, a Puerto Rican single mother, 2 doormen from Midtown, and 2 waitresses from the Ridge. Marcus taught Japanese on Mondays, Spanish on Wednesdays, and English on Fridays. He didn't lecture. He listened. He taught them how language could turn invisibility into power, how fluency was more than words. It was identity rebuilt. The school didn't advertise. It didn't need to. Word spread quietly through kitchens and break rooms. There's a place where you can learn to speak so they have to hear you. Months passed. The world moved on, but not completely. A short documentary appeared online. The Waiter Who Spoke Back. It went viral again, not for spectacle, but for the quiet discipline it revealed. Reporters asked Marcus if he felt vindicated. He said simply, "Justice doesn't need applause. It just needs precision." His story found its way into classrooms and corporate training sessions. A few universities sent invitations. Ted reached out. He accepted one. On the night of his talk, the stage lights glowed like memory. He stood before a silent auditorium and began with the same voice that once carried orders for wine and bread. "There's a strange thing about arrogance. It assumes intelligence makes you powerful, when in truth humility makes you unstoppable. I learned Japanese not to prove anything, but because silence had limits. The night I spoke, it wasn't revenge. It was arithmetic. Arrogance subtracted, humility multiplied." The applause was quiet at first, then rolling, deep. He stepped off the stage the same way he had always moved, measured, calm, invisible until necessary. In a quiet suburb of Connecticut, Thomas Sterling watched the talk on a tablet propped beside an empty glass. His house was beautiful but airless, filled with expensive reminders of success. When Marcus's final line came through, "Never underestimate quiet people. They're just collecting data." Thomas closed the tablet and laughed once, low, almost genuine. He whispered, "Guess I should have listened." Back in Harlem, Marcus locked up his school late that night. Snow had begun to fall, light and soft. He looked at the small sign painted on the door, the Hale Language Institute, and smiled faintly. Behind him, the last of his students left, their laughter echoing down the stairs, bright against the cold. He turned off the lights, pocketed his keys, and stepped into the street. Somewhere far away in the heart of Manhattan, the Ridge restaurant still glittered, still served the rich. But tonight, the city seemed balanced again, just a little, because one man had proved that knowledge spoken softly could break the loudest arrogance. He walked toward the subway, coat collar turned up against the wind. In his mind, he wasn't thinking of money or fame or even victory. He was thinking of sound, the precise rhythm of a foreign word spoken perfectly, the music of understanding. Because in the end, that was the true prize. The 800,000 had bought him freedom, but language had given him something rarer, visibility. And as the train roared into the station, he smiled to himself and thought, not in English, but in Japanese. Mushifenda. That's enough. The doors closed and the city swallowed him. One quiet, fluent man in a world still learning how to listen. If this story moved you, don't just scroll away. Hit like to show support for powerful storytelling. Drop a comment below. What did you learn from Marcus's quiet victory? And if you believe humility can still conquer arrogance, subscribe to Hidden Tales Stories right now and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next life-changing story. Share this video with someone who's ever been underestimated. Let the world hear that quiet genius always wins in the end.